Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're exploring a truly groundbreaking academic white paper by Dr. Bichara Sahely. It's titled Keeping Life-Coherence Alive. You know, if you've ever looked around and felt like our planetary systems are just completely stuck in a rut, despite all our best efforts, you're absolutely going to love this deep dive. We're going to look at the world through a medical lens to really understand civilizational repair. Let's get right into it. Have you ever wondered why our well-meaning attempts to solve massive global issues, think climate change or global inequality, why they so often lead to endless bureaucracy, or, crazy enough, sometimes even create entirely new forms of harm? We try to fix the world, but somehow, actually, scratch that. It's more like the fix itself becomes a permanent fixture of the problem. Why is that? Well, Dr. Sahely offers a fascinating diagnostic model to explain exactly what goes wrong when we try to do the right thing.
Okay, let's dive into this. Let's trace that journey. A movement usually starts as a genuine living corrective concern, right? Maybe it's a sudden, passionate desire to heal a local environment or protect a vulnerable community. But over time, that living distinction becomes stabilized. It becomes a formal framework, then a funded institution, then just a catchy slogan, and finally, a captured orthodoxy. It slowly hardens into an empty shell where that original burning concern is totally lost to institutional self-preservation. So here is our roadmap. We're going to run a medical diagnosis on global issues through 6 quick steps. First, why good solutions fail. Second, what is life coherence? Third, the mythic traps. Fourth, the golden calf's danger. Fifth, the recursive audit. And finally, healing through non-forcing action. Let's start with our first section to identify the underlying symptoms of failed civilizational repair. Section 1. Why good solutions fail. The problem of corrective capture. The core problem here is what Dr. Sahely calls corrective capture. This happens when a repair mechanism begins to conserve itself more strongly than the life it was originally meant to serve. Think about a massive international NGO or a government agency. Their survival, their grant funding, or their public branding suddenly becomes way more important to their leaders than actually solving the original crisis. The organization remains verbally committed to life, for sure, but functionally, it's really just keeping itself alive. Moving on to our next phase, Section 2. What is life coherence? The anatomy of a living concept. This is really the core idea at the heart of our diagnostic model. So Dr. Sahely defines life coherence pretty explicitly here. It's a living practice of discerning whether a pattern of action preserves, restores, and expands life capacity. It's absolutely crucial to remember that we human beings don't interact with reality directly. We interact with the world through the distinctions, the categories, and the measurements that we invent. Life coherence asks a very direct, grounded question. Do these invented distinctions actually nourish living beings, or do they degrade them? And this brilliantly illustrates the profound difference between having a rigid doctrine versus a humble, living discernment. Doctrine seeks final certainty, It imposes rules from above and demands pure compliance. But life coherence remains entirely answerable to real-world consequences. It participates within relationships and treats correction as a regrounding, not some aggressive command. It's literally the difference between forcing a square peg into a round hole and actually nurturing a living, breathing ecosystem. Section 3. The mythic traps. Diagnosing civilizational drift. Here, we'll explore the specific pathologies of how good, life-serving distinctions harden into destructive traps. Now, what's really interesting about this is how we can use ancient narrative memory to map out modern systemic failures. Dr. Sahely identifies 12 archetypal patterns of corrective capture. These aren't just old campfire stories, they're conserved civilizational diagnostics. They show us perfectly how ancient myths diagnose exactly where our modern bureaucratic functions lose their answerability to life and just begin to serve themselves. Let's highlight 3 specific, highly relatable traps that plague our current global governance structures today. First up, the procrustes trap. This is when we mutilate living diversity to fit rigid standards, like forcing a unique, local community to fit perfectly into a rigid international donor spreadsheet. Second, the Cassandra trap. When clear warnings think decades of climate data are heard, applauded, but never actually converted into binding action. And third, the Sisyphus trap. The endless cycles of reform activity, more reports, more global summits, more steering committees, all without any actual structural release. I'm sure we can all think of a few institutions stuck pushing that boulder. This leads us to Section 4, the golden calf danger, the ultimate institutional risk. We're going to discuss the most dangerous pathology of all, when the corrective framework itself becomes an idol. Listen to this stark anti-idolatry warning. A life-coherent distinction becomes life-incoherent when it conserves itself more strongly than the life it was introduced to protect. This is a massive warning against taking a life-saving framework, words like sustainability, resilience, or human rights, and turning it into an empty slogan. It becomes a pure branding exercise or a weapon of moral superiority, while the actual living conditions of real people remain completely wounded. So how do we test for this? Section 5, the recursive audit, running diagnostics on our solutions. This introduces the diagnostic tool we need to test if our systems are genuinely serving living beings. We have a 10-question recursive audit. This is the practical core of keeping our solutions honest and effective. We have to continually run these diagnostics to test if our systems, policies, and technologies are still grounded in reality. We literally have to audit ourselves to ensure our noble frameworks haven't accidentally drifted into becoming golden calves. So the crucial point is this one, central question holding the whole audit together. What happens to life when this distinction is used in this way? We have to look strictly past the noble intentions and the beautiful policy vocabulary. We have to ask the hard stuff. When we apply this rule, who actually gains a voice? What kind of harm becomes authorized? Do living conditions actually improve, or does the institution just look way better on its annual report? Which brings us to our final section, Part 6, Healing Through Non-Forcing Action, the Treatment Plan. This is the prescribed treatment for our planetary affairs. Let's move on and see how this built a path forward by contrasting forcing action with non-forcing action, which is deeply tied to the ancient concept of wu-wei. Forcing action demands compliance. It treats resistance as an annoying obstacle to crush, and it aggressively imposes outcomes. Non-forcing action, on the other hand, treats resistance as valuable information. It seeks to cultivate the right conditions for coherence rather than just performing an empty mandated repair. It's a vital shift from merely commanding reality to actually participating in its healing. And this approach is heavily grounded in what the biologist Humberto Maturana calls the biology of love. Now be careful, this isn't some soft sentimentality. It means we must fiercely oppose the life-destroying pattern without denying the living being. We have to see the other person as legitimate, even during a bitter conflict. Think about it. If we try to fix dehumanization by dehumanizing our opponents, we've already failed. We absolutely must learn to separate the captured, toxic role from the human being trapped inside it. Which leaves us with this ultimate, provocative institutional challenge to end on. What does your system conserve? Does the organization you work for, or the global policies you support, truly conserve the capacity for life to flourish? Or are they quietly just conserving their own survival, their funding streams, and their procedural continuity? Take a look around your own world this week and ask yourself that exact question. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and remember to always keep your own corrective distinctions alive.